For the first candle, we call upon Abe Noble, who will light this candle in memory of his father, Leon Zichronah Livracha, a survivor of the Holocaust. Second candle, we call upon Marcy Maneker, who at this time recalls the names of Truda Bat Rezel, Avraham Grunbaum, and Eva and Leo Shmulevitz. Cantor leads us the words Ani Ma'amin, I believe. Our third candle, we call upon Anna Tenenblatt, recalling her father, Max Weintraub, Zichronah Livracha, of blessed memory. Fourth candle, we call upon Rona Cosgrove, remembering her father, Gabriel Legman, Zichronah Livracha, blessed memory. He used to join us every year for our Holocaust survivors breakfast right here in this room, teaching his story and so many others to the next generation within our own community. Joined with her husband, Ben. Cantor leads us from the book of Psalms, Esa Einai, as we lift up our eyes. Where should our help come from? Esa Einai.
מאין יבוא עזרי אשא עיני אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ.
Before we have the lighting of the last two candles, where we're going to bring a flame, we'll rise for the memorial prayer as the cantor will lead us. Please rise, the memorial prayer, the Amalei Rachamim, in memory of all those who were lost in the Shoah.
נשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה בגן עדן תהא
fifth candle, we call upon Tom and Judy Flesh, Helen and Moshe Sassover. We also recognize Martha and Barry Burkett, recalling Ted and Hetty Orden, Margaret and James Flesh, and Emil and Lola Sassover. Aron Chaviv, last but not least, the story that we are here to honor tonight of Avraham Perlmutter, and call upon Sharon Gavin and Keren Perlmutter to please join us in your family to honor your father's life, Avraham, who just this past year passed away. We learn in the book of Proverbs, Ner Adonai Nishmat Ha'adam. The candle of God is the soul of the human being. And so as we light these 6 candles, we are not only reminded of the blessing that their lives have given us, but the flame that will continue in each of you and to each of us in this community as we join in song Lador Vador, that their memories may go from generation to generation.
Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God elecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushat Hanakdish, ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God elecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatecha nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush leolam ba'ed, ki el melech gadol, melech gadol, v'kadosh ata, ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God elecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatecha nakdish.
Please join together the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divarach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'maru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulomei omaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yit'aleh, v'yithalal, shemei dekudashah barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'maru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'maru. Amen. Osei shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'maru. Amen. May God who brings peace unto heavens bring peace unto all those who mourn. And let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. Thank you. To begin our program, we're going to call upon Sylvia Markovitz. Sylvia here? Yep. From the American Friends of Yad Vashem, who is co-sponsoring this evening with us for words of greeting.
It really is such an honor to be with you this evening, representing the American Society for Yad Vashem and its 40-year partnership and the sole American support for Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center. I bring greetings from both the staff and board here in the United States, as well as the leadership and staff at the Mount of Remembrance in Jerusalem. They are very aware of this event, and I see many of our supporters here, and we are most grateful to Sinai Temple, the Perlmutter and Beijers family, the dignitaries, and all of you who've gathered here to remember our people. Yad Vashem was established in 1953 by the government of Israel. From its inception, one of the fundamental goals has been to gather the names of each and every victim of the Holocaust. It is at the core of the name of the institution, taken from the biblical verse in Isaiah, chapter 56, verse 5. And to them I will give in my house and within my walls a memorial and a name, a Yad Vashem, that shall not be cut off. That is what you are doing here tonight. Over these 70 years, Yad Vashem, through its work in commemoration, documentation, education, and research, has remained true to its mandate. It is the largest repository of Holocaust-related information in the world, and millions of visitors, in person and virtually, benefit from its vast collection of artifacts contained within its museums and exhibitions. One of Yad Vashem's principal responsibilities is to convey the gratitude of the State of Israel and the Jewish people to the righteous among the nations who took great risks to save Jews during the Holocaust. That work is ongoing. Tonight, we have had the privilege of witnessing so many amazing examples of non-Jews who put their lives and the lives of their families in grave danger to save a child. Avraham Perlmutter, Peter and Gertrude Beijers and their children, Pastor Henricus Willigs, Jupe Westerwill and the Westerwill Group each played an important role in Avraham's survival. While most stood by and did nothing, or worse, participated in the persecution and murder of Jews, these fine individuals did something they did not have to do, and we are forever grateful to them and recognize them in a real and very meaningful way at Yad Vashem and its ceremonies around the world. Over 28,000 individuals are recognized with this designation, and we continue to recognize new individuals whose stories are brought to the attention of Yad Vashem. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Before we have our panel discussion, both here and virtually, we have virtual greetings from State Senator Ben Allen, who couldn't be with here but prepared a short greeting online, and we will hear that now.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm State Senator Ben Allen, proudly representing the West Side, Coastal South Bay, Santa Monica Mountains, and Hollywood communities of Los Angeles County, and of course, Sinai Temple. I'm disappointed I'm not able to be with you in person this evening for the screening of Determined, but I'm actually up here in our state's capital, where just this morning we honored Yom HaShoah by recognizing Holocaust survivors and their descendants, including survivor Eva Nathanson, who came up to represent our district. Yom HaShoah, as you all know, means the Day of Remembrance. It's not only an important day for millions of Jews across the world like me and so many of you, but perhaps more importantly for the rest of our society. It's a day where we re-emphasize how important it is for us to care for our survivors, which is why we've worked hard within the Jewish Caucus to secure millions of dollars for Jewish Family Services Los Angeles to support Holocaust survivors. Through our caucus, we've also secured over $2 million to support the expansion of the Holocaust Museum of LA, so we can continue to tell these stories and make sure that the next generations know the story of the Holocaust. We also got over $10 million a few years back for the Museum of Tolerance to create a new exhibit on anti-Semitism so that we can deal with the current threat of anti-Semitism in our society and all other forms of bigotry. We've also ensured that the Holocaust history is being taught in our schools. While some states are trying to rewrite or ignore history, we in California are committed to teaching the truth of the past and making sure that we learn from our history, particularly our Holocaust history. It's important to tell the stories of these atrocities that were committed in the past, but also to celebrate the thousands of heroes who risked their lives to save Jews. Heroes like those folks who saved Avraham Perlmutter. And I just want to thank Keren for creating this documentary and sharing your family's story. Lastly, I want to thank the wonderful Sinai Temple for hosting this important event, all that you do in helping our community. And thank you to everyone who attended this evening and continued to tell this vitally important story.
Thank you. So we're now going to be joined, first of all, by Keren Perlmutter. As much as I can read her bio, as you read this book, determined at the end when your father not thanks you, but the pride that he has in your entire family, it was just an unbelievable thing to read, and a brief bio of only some of the accomplishments that you have already had in your life. Ph.D. award-winning scientist, filmmaker, publisher, public speaker, BS in electrical engineering from UCLA, MS in electrical engineering, MS in statistics, and PhD in electrical engineering, all from Stanford University. Just the beginning. Chief scientist, head of international research, development division at AOL, you've got mail. She also developed the revolutionary ultra-resolution film restoration process for Warner Brothers, published author of many technical papers, numerous academic awards, been granted 39 patents for inventions, most recently edited and published her father's #1 best-selling autobiography, Determined, the story of survivor Avraham Perlmutter, in English and in Dutch, created the award-winning documentary that we just watched, and continues, most importantly, to share her father's life story around the world. Keren Perlmutter. The next guests that are about to join online, Hank Beijers, Emma Beijers, Jerome Beijers, and Max Beijers. Very briefly, Hank, as you saw in the film, the grandson of Peter and Gertrude, who hid Avram for the 1 year in the Netherlands, who are now part of the Righteous Among the Nations of Yad Vashem, who was interviewed in this documentary. Hank has also lived with the Perlmutter family here as well, and currently lives in, I apologize for my pronunciation, but Maasbury in the Netherlands, only 10 miles from where the village where his grandfather hid Avram. Emma is his 26-year-old daughter of Hank, also saw at the conclusion of the documentary. She stayed with the Perlmutter family for 8 months in 2017, currently working in her master's degree in integrated food studies in Copenhagen. Her thesis explored food policy council in Belgium and their successful policies on mitigating food waste. Jerome Beijers, 28-year-old son of Hank, assisted with the translation for the film and the Dutch version of Avraham's biography, also currently living in Maasbury in the Netherlands, a master's degree in history, works on various projects for local government. And Max, 25-year-old son of Hank, he also stayed with the Perlmutter family, very gracious Haklasat Orchim, welcoming guest, for 6 weeks in 2022. He has a business degree from Radboud University in the Megen, and is currently working in the energy sector for Clever Energy BV, helping businesses deal with the energy transition. So we want to welcome the Beijers family online. Can we see them? There we go. Hank Beijers. And I think as we ask the questions, we'll be able to see them. So I'm going to do less talking and just a couple of asking a few questions, and then we'll open it up to conversation as well. Keren, I'm most interested as a clergy member who uses a pulpit to share words, and you often wonder if words really matter. Can they lead to actions to the people that you're speaking about, of course, in person, but now even online? And to see the words of the pastor saying, in order to be a religious person, you must save humanity. Maybe you can give a little more background of the research that you did into the pastor, into that story, and to maybe Hank as well, your knowledge of the pastor, and if we know anything about his family and where they are as well.
I think that I'm going to first have Hank, answer that question, and I'll add anything to that. So, Hank, you want to start with that?
Hey, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you hear the question?
Well,
About Pastor Vullings.
Pastor Vullings was he was born in a village very close to the town Grubbevorst, and at the time when the war started, he was in Grubbevorst. He was a pastor, but he knew about the dangers of Nazism. Part of it because he was in Germany in the 30s. He traveled there and he saw what was happening. So when the war started, of course, we being so close to the German border, well, it was a matter of a couple hours before the whole army passed the River Maas, and then he was the day after, 2 days after they were in Mass, and he called upon the people to come into resistance, and that the arms could not do anything anymore, but the people should do something now. So he publicly addressed, to come into resistance. And he was a Roman Catholic priest. Like that whole area where we lived was very Roman Catholic, at least in those days. So the influence of, what priests was saying had of course an impact. And throughout what happened in the years to come, there was a whole resistance part within, priests of, Roman Catholic priests who actually were involved in hiding people, mainly Jewish people. And his family, where he was born, it's still there. And there were still descendants of him living there. So great-grandchildren, it's a farm with cows, and in the old days it used to be also a beer brewery. So that's still there, and with Av and Ruth, and I think Sharon and Karen were there at the time too. We visited there, I think twice So he was quite a remarkable person, and there are many, in our area, where he's remembered.
Thank you. And then, Karen, let's go back to the beginning, because so many people hear their parents' stories, but they don't have, first of all, the ability to make a film. So what was that moment in your life that you said, okay, I've heard my father's story, because so many other people also, they chose not to tell their story. So growing up, was that part of it, or was there a moment that your dad said, you know what, I want to share my story? And then how did you translate it to what we saw tonight?
Well, first I want to thank you and Sinai Temple for the opportunity to show my film. And I also want to mention that in addition to my sister Sharon Gavin, who's a member of Sinai Temple, who's here tonight, also have my brother David Perlmutter and his wife Wendy Perlmutter. And so, yeah, growing up, my father would share his stories of, when I was growing up, he would share with us his stories of his captures and subsequent escapes. Like, that was mostly what he concentrated on. And also about the people who helped him, and like the Beijers. And then, they came to visit, like the film said, and Hank stayed with us for 5 years. So we became very familiar with the Beijers story. But my father's always been an inspiration to me, and, so there's so many important messages in his story, like the importance of possessing resilience and determination, of helping others, of having compassion, tolerance, and empathy for people of all faiths and backgrounds, of obtaining a good education. So we were raised with these messages. And, there just came a point, I would say about 10 or so years ago where I decided I wanted to help him share his story to as wide an audience as possible, to many generations to come, because he had started writing a document about his life, and I decided, well, let me edit it and publish it so it can actually be a book, so it'll be more accessible to people. And as was mentioned, we published it in English and in Dutch with the help of the Beijers. And then I started speaking with my father, and we've spoken to thousands of people at schools and museums and other venues. But I felt that there were certain benefits to actually conveying my father's story with a documentary. You know, I could include much more visual materials. I can include videos, and I could also include interviews with some of the people who helped him, like Jan Smit and Minsha Beyer, so we could get their perspective on the dangerous times and of helping my father. And because I had a particular vision for how I wanted the documentary to be, I decided to produce, write, direct, and edit it myself.
So I want to go to the second generation of Beyers. Who helped translate it? Was it Max?
Jerome.
Jerome.
Yeah.
So Jerome, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Over here.
there we go. Technology is amazing. It is truly amazing that we were able to have this both generational conversation around the world. I believe it's 4 in the morning there, correct?
5 now.
5 in the morning. Okay,
5 in the
it's late
morning.
now in the asparagus fields and the cows, right? Tell us about why you decided to take on that project of translating it into Dutch, and if you know where that's gone. By the way, is it pronounced Moed?
Moot.
Moot. Oh, it's
Yeah.
interesting that's
So-
pronounced that way, but in English it's Moed, and I thought actually the Hebrew word Moed means a sacred festival. And so the fact that determined then goes to Moed, even though it's pronounced Moot, it just, as your dad said, maybe an angel is watching over that name as well. So tell us about that process of translating into Dutch and where you see this book being read going forward in that language.
Well, it's the same stuff with every translation. You just read the book first, and then you go and work on how you put the sentences into Dutch. So my contribution was that I did a rough translation of the entire book into Dutch, which then was gradually shaped into a more fluent Dutch, more fluent Dutch. So there is a lot of similarities between English and Dutch, of course, but there's also some differences in mainly style and grammar sometimes a bit. So you have to take that into account. But all in all, I think it was a smooth process that went. That we managed to achieve quickly. And then I hope this book will be read by basically everyone in the Netherlands. Shouldn't be so hard because there's only 70 million people living here. But looking forward into the future, we hope to be able to distribute it among schools, among events, at museums, basically the same way that's happening in the United States right now.
So myself, as a 40-year-old Jew in Los Angeles, only once in my life has met a righteous Gentile in person. It was actually in Poland in 2005. How many survivors have you met during your life, or was Avraham the one that really encapsulated that story?
Well, during my stay with the Perlmutter family in Los Angeles, I met one other survivor, a woman who had, I don't remember it correctly, I think it was that she had stayed, she had survived the war in Poland or Slovenia, but it was, well, the beauty of it was that I just
kind of met her. Like I anticipate meeting her. So you just she was also at the event where I'm still speaking. So you just have it just happens. You just meet each other and then you have a conversation about quite an extraordinary topic.
And Emma, are you there? Emma?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Nice to see you again. We had the chance to speak a couple of weeks ago. And I asked you when we met the last time, that when did you know the story of your great-grandparents, and how has that impacted your life today, now not living in Netherlands, but in Copenhagen?
Yes. So for me, I always knew this story, I guess, from the beginning. To me, it's like the Perlmutter family is also my family. So the fact that our families are connected in that way is very special to me. And I guess our story always inspired me to be determined to, finish my education. He was very, very firm about that always. But I guess always to push on, even if things are hard. And I think that at the moment what I'm doing with my studies, for example, in Copenhagen, I really hope I can make a positive impact on the world by improving our food systems. And I guess I do that in the spirit of things that Alf have told me and want my great-grandparents to be courageous and to step up for other people.
And as to the second generation, and then we'll go back to Hank and then back to Keren, what is, and there's a lot more than one, but what is one lesson specifically this past year as Avraham passed away? What's one lasting lesson that you'll take away from Avraham's story as you really knew him, not just in a book or a movie, but as a human being?
Well, that he was always so happy and loving and always wanted to see the positive things in life. And that's something I will always carry with me, that even things are gloom and dark, try to be happy, try to be positive, fight your way through it.
Beautiful. And Max and Jerome, I'm going to ask you the same question. A lasting legacy and lesson that you've learned from Avraham and the Perlmutter family.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That if you live through what I've lived through, what Jewish people lived through during those times, that there's somehow a way to transcend experiencing something like that and still make a good life, a fulfilling life, a happy life. That's very inspirational to me. That means that very evil things can happen in your life, but it's still possible to keep going, be a positive impact on the world and the people around you. Yeah.
And if I can add to that, enjoy chocolate. That I think is also an important lesson from us.
Oh, chocolate. Got it. Keren, I want to ask you and Hank maybe the same question because it comes from two different perspectives. But what was so unique about this town that it wasn't just the Beijers family that stepped up, and that question that he asked then your father was a tough question. Would you do this if you were in my shoes? What was so special about that town that they weren't the minority, but in fact they were part of this group? It couldn't just be a pastor saying that. What did you find in your research, and what, Hank, do you see about living in that town that says this is the right thing to do for humanity?
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that 42 out of the 240 families were hiding Jews. And they were all very religious Catholics. And as mentioned, Pastor Veldings really encouraged them to help people, and they felt it was the right thing to do. And what was interesting is that Rubenforst is in the province of Limburg, and the whole province of Limburg was an exception within the Netherlands. And there's actually a researcher called Herman van Rens who investigated this province and how they hid so many Jews. And it turned out there were 2,200 Dutch and German Jews that were hidden within Limburg, and only 10% were caught compared to about a third in Amsterdam. And actually, they had an interesting distinction that it had more Jews after the war than before, because in 1933 there were 800, and after the war there were over 2,000. And one of the reasons Herman van Rijn speculated was because they were a very tight-knit community, and so there was no anonymity, and so that meant that they could support each other. And so I think they were more willing to risk their lives because they had the support of their community. And even in the film, you see, like, when somebody heard that a Nazi was coming, they would tell their neighbor, and then the next person would tell their neighbor. So I think they banded all together in support, except for the mayor, who was a collaborator. And that was one thing he had speculated. And I'm going to toss it to Hank to see what other things he'd like to add.
Well, I agree with Keren, but also perhaps one of the most significant parts 40 years after the war in 1994, and Keren and Sharon know because they were there was a reunion in the village with all the people who were hiding out there, Jewish mainly, and then the families where they were hiding. And that was quite, 40 years after date, to have everybody there with all the families, and they were sharing their stories. So that was quite special, and I think that was a continuation of what was, happening in these dark days. It was a close-knit community. People were not, many of them, we were not afraid of Germans. Most people spoke German. So, and there was a safety net whenever there was a razzia or whatever. People would be warned, so they were, prepared. So I think that's part of it. Has certainly to do with religion, as that you have to do the good things, and that they realized that people were in dire needs. And I think that's the background of it. But also, of course, the way it was organized by the Joop Westerwil group, and they would, how it was connected to Pastor Vullings. It's quite an amazing story, and it's still developing. There are still new things added to it that we did not know, or that we, other people say, okay, remember this happened because it was Grubbevoort, but there were more villages surrounding us, where we, little kids, babies were hiding out. So it's an amazing story. And even, I think, what was it now, 6-7 years ago, we had a requiem. It was a Mr. Lachman. He was a composer living in Amsterdam, hiding out with his family in Grubbevoort. And he composed a requiem for Pastor Vullings. And then it was performed in the early 60s. And then again, those, 6-7 years ago, we did it in Grubbevoort in the church. It was performed again. So that was also a special moment again after the war.
I have one more question, and then I want to open it up to Q&A. I also want to say one thing. I was introduced to the Beijers family when we celebrated Alex's bar mitzvah. And when Sharon kept giving me the honors list, she kept saying, you need to talk about the Beijers family. I said, who are these Beijers family? And thankfully, with the miracle of technology now that we live stream our services, I said, you need to say hello in Shabbat Shalom to the Beijers family at Alex's bar mitzvah. So it's an amazing moment how technology came in a very difficult way the last few years, but has really allowed us to also celebrate these generational moments as well. What was it like when you first went to the Netherlands many years ago, back to your father's journey? Again, it's different to read a book and to write about it than to walk the steps that your dad walked.
So, well, first, my sister and I actually stayed a summer in the Grubenforst, just down the street from where my father hid. And the Beijers house, actually, Mincha Beijers was still living there. She lived to over 100. And then at the end of the summer, my parents came out, and then my father showed us around. He showed us the attic where he hid and the hole in the backyard. And so that was very special to see all those places and significant places in his life. And then, as Hank mentioned, in 1994, we went back again. At that point, we visited Rotterdam and saw one of his hiding places, and also met with Jan Smit, who was the member of the Westerwil group. And, we were just talking, and my father was videotaping, and so I was so happy to be able to include that in the film. And then 10 years later, when we came back for the 60th reunion, we actually went and visited with my parents. We visited all the refugee camps where he was located, where he stayed, and also Le Strecht, where my where my aunt stayed, the pioneer camp, and we also went to The Hague. So, it was very special and meaningful to visit all of these different locations with my father.
And then to the Beijers family, what does it mean? And I know he shared just very briefly in the film, in the documentary, but to have that demarcation, or really the honor of being the righteous Gentiles from Yad Vashem. Maybe for the generations, you can speak with that as well. First Hank, and then the children as well. And then if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone over so we can hear as well. Yeah.
Well, the medal was awarded to my grandparents, and it was done by a representative from the Israeli embassy in the church in Grubbevoss, both for my grandparents and for Pastor Vullings. So it was quite a happening because the church was full, people were there. And it was the importance of it is that it's remembered. It's something that happened, and that it gets the attention it deserves. The stories that are told, and people are aware of, hey, what happened? So in that regard, I think the Yad Vashem is a very important organization because it keeps the story alive. What happened, and it shouldn't happen ever again. So in that sense, yes, it was very special, and only recently a Yad Vashem was awarded to, also the grandparents of people in Grubbevoss who did the same thing as my grandparents did. So it's amazing that so many years after that they received it, it's still an ongoing thing. So very good. So more and more people, like, once Av did it for our family, they went in that process. So that's very good.
And then to the children, to Hank, Jerome, and Emma, what does that mean to you as now third generation family of the Beijers?
Well, I would say that I see it as something that you have to try to carry on, try to live up to in a sense, because it's of course something that happened long before I was born, but it's still something that happened in your family, and you would always want to carry on the good things that happened. So it's also part of remembering the actions, but then again also wanting to continue in that spirit and live up to that. So that's what it means to me.
That's a very inspirational and admirable standard they set for the next generation.
Emma?
Yeah, I completely agree what my father said, and also what my brothers are saying. It's a true honor to have your family's name written there. And I hope it's something, if it's something we all can live up to. Yeah.
And actually, we'll love your response to them about that demarcation as well.
Well, I think it's so powerful to think about how an act of kindness can impact not only someone, receiving it and giving it, but the descendants of both parties as well, many generations later. And I think, what was so powerful of what Emma was saying, and also in the film, was where she said, and I admire my great-grandparents, and I would want to do the same thing and help people. I mean, so I think it's such a wonderful message about, and all of them, you can really see that the values of their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents really, came down to all of these descendants, because they're all such wonderful people with good values, and they all want to help the world in some way. They're really amazing people.
We can even see you blushing from around the world. It's the best. We want to open it up to questions, and before we do that, I also want to recognize that this is a moment of togetherness as well, and we have representatives from our good friends at Church of the Good Shepherd, Penny Duffy and Sandra Bossi, who we do such great work with the Catholic Diocese and Sinai Temple, so thank you for joining us. And also representatives from both consuls of Germany, so thank you so much for being here as well. And also the consuls of Azerbaijan, who Sinai Temple also has just partnered with so many great things over the years. Q&A, so please, if you have questions, Christopher will hand the microphone over. I know it's hard to go first. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Oh, just make sure everybody, they got to hear you in the Netherlands.
It was just a really wonderful film, and I presume the interview was with the Shoah Foundation. With
From
your
my
dad.
for most of it, yes,
And the blue
was
shirt
my
when he went-
father's interview, and we also had some from 2016 when he was giving a talk at the
second
Holocaust Museum
right,
in LA.
he was
Right.
older then.
Mhm.
My question is how many other stories do you think are out there like your dad's?
In terms of, you mean the particular aspects of his story?
Huge amount of effort that was done in his behalf.
Yeah, it's quite a unique story. I think a lot of Holocaust survivor stories are unique, right? And there are all sorts of reasons and luck and people helping that made the people survive. But it is unique. I mean, I know when my father's spoken at the different museums, the people working there would often say, we've heard a lot of survivors speaking, and his story is unique compared to everyone else's we've heard. But, like I said, everyone's story is fascinating and moving, and, so, yeah, that's the answer.
As you're getting the microphone, you had a chance to meet your grandfather?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe share a little bit about him.
You mean Keren Perlmutter?
Yeah, in Israel during the war, comes over in the 70s.
Yeah, he came over, and so we knew him. Yeah, he never really learned English, but he knew Yiddish and Hebrew. But yeah, we interacted with him, for a number of years. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'm Josh from San Diego. My question is directed at the younger third generation people in the Netherlands. And I'm curious to know, from your experience being part of your family, is it something you discuss among your friends? Does your community know that this is your experience? Do your friends care? Do the other young adults care? Or what's the reaction or knowledge in the general community about what your family's done?
Well, you go ahead.
Well, it's something I've definitely discussed with my friends, and usually they also have stories about what their grandparents or great-grandparents did during the war. And usually when I talk about it with other people, they find it quite inspiring. But yeah, it's definitely known among friends, but it's just, I guess in our community, as I said, all our grandparents or great-grandparents have a similar story about the Second World War, about what they did to help other people, or yeah.
Thank you. No, I appreciate knowing that it's spoken about and that other people get to hear about what you and your family have been part of.
Any other questions?
Oh, I just want to add, to that. So a couple of years ago, I actually went and spoke to some high schools in Rubenfors, to a high school for multiple classes to share my father's story. And as mentioned, the book is in Dutch, and we're planning to show the film in the Netherlands in October, and we hope to be able to show it in various schools there as well, so they'll become familiar with this as well.
Anybody else?
Hi, thank you again for the very meaningful documentary that you made. With 63, I think I was just hearing today, 63% of Gen Z and millennials not knowing that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. And in terms of education in New York, 20% of Gen Z not believing that Jews caused the Holocaust. I think it's more important than ever, your film that you made and the legacy that your father gave you and you're passing on. Could you tell us a little bit about your vision for this movie and kind of the next steps as you think about, sharing his story beyond LA?
Yeah, so in terms of the film, first of all, I plan to have educational distribution because I want to show it to as many schools as possible. For example, the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be showing it screening it to 2 public high schools. And one reason it's so important is because it's during their teenage years that people form their ethical and moral values. And so I also developed a study guide to accompany the film and the book so that the audiences, the students can relate my father's story to their own lives and to the contemporary world. And I do plan to make it more available to the general public as well, to different institutions and organizations. It's already done the film festival circuit, and it is available on Vimeo on demand, and I plan to look into additional streaming channels. In terms of the story in general, I speak regularly at the Museum of Tolerance sharing my father's story. I also speak at schools and other venues. So I continue, and also with the book, book clubs, read the book, and I do Q&As with that. So I look for different ways in order to share my story, share my father's story. And for the future, one of the things I'd like to do is have basically like a mini-series or multi-episode series about my father's story, because I think there's a lot of material, not only with him, but with his sister and his parents and his relatives, and that I think it's more than a 2-hour movie would be able to capture. So I think that would be something that I hope to do in the future.
Thank you. Just one last follow-up question on that, because what you're doing is, I don't know how you have any time to sleep. What can we do? Obviously, you captured this story, and you're doing so much, and I think everybody here is extremely impressed with not what you did before you did the film, but also what you're doing with this film. So what can we do to help spread the word of this story and other stories?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, first of all, I think for any second generation or third generation or spouses of Holocaust survivors, I think it's important to first learn about the story and the messages of their family member who is a survivor, and then just explore different ways and different mediums, whatever works best, to share that story. For example, there was a 17-year-old, maybe you heard about it, and he did some TikTok videos of his 95-year-old grandmother who was a Holocaust survivor, and those TikTok videos got 75 million views. So my point is that, there's all sorts of different ways that you can share the story. And I'm actually actively helping a few members, a few people who have family members who were Holocaust survivors, and helping them prepare presentations so that they can share it to schools and museums. And one lady that I helped, she actually spoke yesterday at the Museum of Tolerance. And I think beyond that, it's really important for people to educate themselves about the current anti-Semitism and to share that with others, and hopefully educate them as well, and to make sure that people understand that, genocide starts with words, and then words lead into violence. And so by understanding anti-Semitism, and current day anti-Semitism, which is at the highest levels since it's been tracked, for decades, since 1979, when it began tracking, I think it's important that by understanding anti-Semitism and about hate and prejudice, people will hopefully become familiar with the warning signs so that something like this, like the Holocaust, can never happen again. And so, like I said, again, words matter. And so if you hear something, an anti-Semitic joke or whatever, it's important to say, you know what, that's not okay. Like, for example, when Kanye West said what he did, it led to an actual increase in anti-Semitic incidents, right? And everyone knows about the banner over the freeway. And so, and it's a fact that it actually led to an increase in incidents. And so we have, but I think the most important thing is education. And that, like I said, and it's important, and it's good that in California, you know, they have where the Holocaust education is a law that you have, you know, that you have to teach students. It's all education, education, education. That's what I always say.
And so I want to conclude with a story about education. Apologize. Actually, to your family, to everybody, but also to the Beijers family as well. I've been carrying around this book a lot recently, reading it and thinking a lot about this. And I was in my car today before I came here, took my son to Little League practice, and he's in 3rd grade here at Sinai Akib Academy, where your father spoke in the movie. And I asked him what he learned today, and he said he learned the story of Anne Frank. And I said, where did Anne Frank take place? And he said, the Netherlands. And I was on the way to Little League practice, and I said, I want to tell you another story that also took place in the Netherlands, and that was your father's story. And so 75 million foods are important, and also one by one, we tell our children, we tell our friends the story of Avraham Perlmutter, the story of all the families who lit these 6 candles, the stories of so many who we know, and as importantly, the millions of stories who we will never know, but whose lives impacted what we do here this evening. And so we want to thank Keren, we want to thank the Perlmutter Gavin family, we want to thank the Beijers family for waking up early or maybe staying up late, depending on which way you're going. But you are, even though one of the righteous Gentiles in our tradition, we say that there's a Lamed Vavniks, there's a 36 Tzaddikim, the righteous people in this world. And it is absolutely a fact that we have met one of those families tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing everybody soon. Have a great night or have a great day. Thank you.